What's up, guys? It's Rosario
and Magnus,
and tonight we're going to bring you some information about the builds. You can check out all this stuff at the battle.net website, but we've decided to mess around with some of the builds, you know, just to see what we can do. You can also check out the runestones on here, which is pretty cool. Since we don't actually have the full game, most of these builds are just kind of for fun to see what we think could synergize the best when it comes to all the different abilities and the runestones with what they do. So we got, I think, 5 or 6 different builds to show you that we will go through. So we're going to start off with, I'll go through the first build, and then Magnus will go through the next one. And we'll be talking back and forth, you know, any other input that we have for it. Tonight, as you can see, we're doing the Barbarian. And the first build that we're going to be doing is a Frenzy build. Very much like in regular Diablo 2, Frenzy build is a pretty good build. And it was based mostly off of attack speed, with some movement increases from Frenzy. I don't know if... Yeah, Frenzy in this one does not increase movement speed like it did in the other game. So that'll be one thing you'll lose a little bit, but it doesn't seem as important due to having like leap attack and charge and stuff and everything in Diablo 3. So, not to mention you can use like sprint and stuff if you want to. So to start off our Frenzy build, we decided to go with Warcry, which is just mostly to start the fight, because it's the best Fury generator in the beginning. It also increases armor and stuff, which we don't think is that important in the beginning of the game, but when you get into the harder difficulties, that may be pretty vital to making sure that you stay alive. Because with this specific build, we're going off of a Wrath of the Berserker, where you can get a rune that increases the... I believe it's the uptime of the Berserker
for every amount. I believe it's 26.
Yeah, 26 rage increases the duration by 1 second. So we don't have a lot of healing and defensive abilities, because most of our things are about generating rage. So that's why that's another reason why we like Warcry, because that'll definitely help out. So the rune that we chose, you have, first I'll just go over that you have a white, red, yellow, blue, and black rune. They all do different things. You can check out all of them. But we decided with the best one is that we're going to start the fight off with Warcry and then Furious charge in. And since we want to make sure that we can get Wrath the Berserker up right away, which costs 50 Fury, we decided to go with the yellow rune, which increases the Fury generated when you use the ability to 42, which puts you only 8 away. And once you do Furious charge, which generates enough sufficient rage, you can Wrath the Berserker and then battle rage almost right away. That Warcry generates 30 Fury, but like we said, 42. And then Frenzy, which each swing does 100% weapon damage, which we believe can go up if you pick a specific rune, but I believe the rune I choose for this one is more about gaining life or something. We'll go into that in a second though. And then every time you hit, you can stack it up to 5 times to increase your attack speed, which, as they say, can total up to 75%. And the rune I chose for that is this is one of the other healing things that we chose, because we felt like we needed to make sure that we had enough to survive the mid and late game. So every time you kill a creature with Frenzy, it heals you for 13% of your maximum life over 6 seconds. And hopefully, if you're doing enough damage, that will keep you alive for a long point. And we took Furious Charge because we thought about Leap Attack, but Leap Attack generally puts you in the center of a pack of monsters, and Frenzy's better when things are in a cone arc in front of you rather than surrounding you. So we decided to go with Charge, because then you can knock enemies back and you can kind of help position them better. And you also have that initial Fury generation of 15, so that would be pretty cool. And then with Furious Charge, I believe we chose, you generate 5 Fury for every target we hit during the charge. So that'll help with maintaining that constant Fury generation we want to keep Wrath of the Berserker up as long as possible. And then we needed some spenders, so we took Hammer the Ancients, because that's a pretty good one. The whole point of this build is to keep things right in front of you and close to you, so we didn't want to go with like Seismic Slam or anything, because then they'd be too far away, and you may have time when you're not generating Fury. So we want this one because it does do some AoE kind of in front. You can choose some runes to make it do more AoE if you want to, and it's a pretty good dump for Fury when you get to the point where your Wrath of the Berserker up is your battle, and your battle rage is up. And the rune I went with that is critical hits have an 18% chance to cause enemies to drop treasure or health globes. Mostly just because, you know, that's kind of the point. We want treasure, and health globes will help increase your survivability also. So, and we generate a lot of crit from Wrath of the Berserker. So that's a pretty good rune stone. And then Battle Rage, as you've seen from the beta, it just increases damage and critical hit chance. Damage by 20%, critical hit by 4%. You can increase that damage with a rune, but I believe I go with a different rune. Yeah, I go with every critical hit generates 4 additional Fury. That's also why, if we're going with items and stuff, we'd probably, theoretically, we would stack a lot of crit and attack speed. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly how that build out is going to go based off the gear, since we don't have the late game gear. And most of these abilities, like I don't think you get Furious Charge. I don't think you don't get Wrath of the Berserker, so we can't test everything out, but we can at least theorize what we think will be pretty good. And the Wrath of the Berserker, it's one of your last abilities that you can get as a Barbarian. You enter Berserker Rage, increasing crit hit or critical hit by 10%, attack speed by 45%, dodge by 20, and movement speed by 20. So that way we're still getting some movement speed and we're getting some dodge for some survivability. And then with Frenzy and this, that puts us at over 100%. It's like 75. 120% increase attack speed. So you're going to be swinging really fast, which means you're going to be generating rage faster, which is really nice. And then what we did was we used to Thrive on the Chaos. This is a thing we were talking about, where every 26 Fury gained while Wrath of the Berserker is active adds another 1 second to the duration of the effect. Now, we're not sure if there's an internal cooldown, because it doesn't say there's any kind of cooldown to gaining that 1 second. So with all the abilities that you have, as long as you are constantly spending Fury so you can continue to generate Fury, that's why we have the Hammer of the Ancients. We think you can, I don't know if you can keep it up all the time, but you can keep it up a lot longer than the original time, which I think is 15 seconds. So we're thinking that with this build and with the right gear, you could definitely at least double that.
Absolutely.
Which will make this pretty strong.
Or at least last as long to, however long as there are monsters to keep attacking.
And not to mention, you still, like, you have a 120-second cooldown. There are a couple abilities that you can use to decrease that cooldown if necessary with some of your passive skills, but we decided not to go with that because the passive skill that affects Wrath of the Berserker affects 2 other abilities that we're not actually using. So we feel like we have other passives that could help us more with the whole concept of wanting to generate at least 26 rage every 1 second. Or it'd be like 26 every 2 seconds, really. So. Okay, so we got 3 passive skills that we can choose, and this would be a full level character. We decided to first start with Animosity, which increases Fury generation by 10%, maximum Fury by 20. We're not really worried about the maximum Fury because I don't think I've ever had a thing where I'm like, man, if I had 120 Fury, this should be so much easier. But just the fact that you have that 10% increase means that all your abilities will be regenerating that faster, and hopefully that works with that rune. I don't see why I wouldn't.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good one. We also chose Unforgiving because you don't degenerate Fury, and you're constantly regenerating at least 1 Fury every 2 seconds. There are a couple other abilities we could probably use, but we felt this was probably one of the more important ones. That way we don't have to ever worry about losing Fury, and no matter what, we're constantly at least getting some. So even if you're running around and you haven't War Cried or Fury is charged yet, you're still at least gaining Fury, which is pretty cool. And then the last one we chose was this one. We could choose a couple different things. We decided to go with this because it reduces all non-physical damage, so you don't have to worry as much about spellcasters when you're in the higher levels. But the big thing is that any ranged attacks or elemental attacks that hit you generate 3 more Fury, which we felt was that was the whole point of the build. It's just more Fury, more Fury, more Fury. There are some things that increase, like life per damage and critical chance. Like another good one would probably be Ruthlessness, which increases critical hit chance by 5% and the damage of crits by 50%. That's another really good one because every time we crit, we generate more Fury, so you could go with either one. We haven't hashed out all the math there because since we don't have all the potential gear. We didn't feel that would be worthwhile at this moment, but it is definitely theoretically another good ability.
And any of this can change. We are still in the beta process, so these numbers are not permanent.
Right. Every time they come out with a patch, they come out with very different numbers.
And these are also the base runes. They're not the higher level runes. So generating 26 Fury to add 1 second onto it may later translate to generating 40 Fury to add 2 seconds onto it. So that it's something that we'll have to play around with once we know the numbers for the higher level runes, and the numbers for the skills all are now permanent upon release.
It'd be interesting to see though if, because of what that rune does, if it might actually be better to go with a lower level rune. You think like higher level means that it would be better, and like with what you said, you could, like what it would have to be is you'd have to regenerate more Fury, but it couldn't ever be double.
Yeah.
Because like if you're doing 26 per one, and then you're just doing double that, then it's not really a benefit. Because you're still generating the same amount per turn.
Well, maybe it'll lower the amount needed to get to the threshold to increase that 1 second.
Right.
Or slightly increase it and add an extra second or a second and a half.
Yeah. Okay, so that is our nice little frenzy build trying to keep Wrath the Berserker up. So now we're going to go into another build. We've got a couple here. So I will... which one do you want to do?
Let's do the Whirlwind.
Okay, so we'll do the Whirlwind. And Magnus will go ahead and go through that.
Alright. For those of you who played Diablo 2, you will recognize Whirlwind. It's the same as it was in Diablo 2 in that the Barbarian spins around in a giant tornado of death. It's a very popular build in Diablo 2, and everyone really enjoyed it, so they brought it back for Diablo 3. Just like we did in the Frenzy build, we are using Warcry with the golden rune stone to generate that extra Fury, so that we can really jump into this with a bit of Fury, so we can start whirlwinding right away. We chose Leap Attack rather than Furious Charge this time, so we can get into the middle of the combat and really just make our presence known, get surrounded by the enemies to really maximize the effectiveness of Whirlwind. We chose the Alabaster rune to land with such force that enemies suffer a 70% chance to become stunned for 3 seconds. Not only will you be making an entrance, you will increase survivability just because those enemies won't be able to get an attack on you right away, and hopefully half of them will be dead before those 3 seconds are up. We chose Cleave as another Fury generation because of the wide arc and the increased damage. We chose the Indigo rune with it because it'll draw enemies in towards you. That way, once you run out of Fury, if you're whirlwinding, you can draw more enemies in while gaining Fury and then start to whirlwind once more. We chose Threatening Shout with the Obsidian Moonstone to get a sort of Magic Find aspect to this build. This game is all about the loot. It's all about finding better loot. And what the Obsidian Room with the Threatening Shout gives you a 16% chance to drop additional treasure, and more treasure is more chances at getting better loot. It also reduces damage done by the enemy for within 25 yards by 50% for 15 seconds. Again, you can get that off before you start whirlwinding again to try and increase your survivability while you're in the middle of combat. And the key skill to all this is Whirlwind. You spin, doing multiple attacks to everything in your path for 44% weapon damage. We chose the Golden Runestone for this, which will reduce the cost. The whole point of this build is we want to keep Whirlwind up as much as possible. So once we have done the initial Fury generation of Warcry and Leap Attack, we really want to go right into Threatening Shout and Whirlwind, and we're going to need the Fury that we have generated from these two in order to keep that up before we go back into Cleave and then Whirlwind again. As for our final skill, we chose Revenge, which does 150 weapon damage to all enemies within 8 yards and gains 5 life for each enemy hit. Revenge has a 15% chance to become active for a short time when you are hit by an enemy attack. The whole point of this is We wanted something we didn't have to click on or pop up. This is something where if you're hit, you start generating health. And in the middle of combat, whirlwinding against a ton of enemies, you're going to be in the middle of combat and you're going to be hit a lot. We chose the Indigo Runestone because it increases the chance that Revenge will activate to 127% every time you're hit. So that way you can start generating health right away, and you're not missing chances for this to proc. For our passive skills, we chose Unforgiving, just because, again, we don't want your Fury to degenerate over time. If you have generated Fury over a previous battle, we want to keep that coming in because that means you're going to have Whirlwind for a longer period of time. Also, the Fury generation helps you keep that up. I mean, it's not going to keep it up for a long time. You're only generating 1 Fury every 2 seconds, but every little bit helps, especially in something like this. We chose Brawler for our second passive skill, and as long as there are 5 enemies within 8 yards, you do increased damage. This whole build is jumping into scores and scores of enemies, so a lot of the times there are going to be 5 enemies within close range, and that just does increase damage to your Whirlwind. And Bloodthirst, gaining 3% of all damage done as life. This is for survivability, especially in the later games, Infernal or in Hell. That way, you're doing damage, your Revenge is proccing, and all the damage you do is gaining life. Again, this is survivability. You're in the middle of combat, everything's going to be attacking you. So, that's basically our build. Survivability, a little bit of magic find, and just whirlwinding the hell out of things. What would you like to do?
I guess the next one we'll decide to do is the Tides of Pain. It's a pretty interesting build. This is kind of a theoretical build because we don't have half of these abilities in Diablo 2, so we're not sure exactly how it's going to work. But the whole reason why it's called Tides of Pain is because you have a lot of skills where you can control the movement of your enemies, such as pushing them back, pulling them towards you, or just doing a lot of area of effect damage. And we felt it would be pretty interesting to see if you could constantly do that, to where you're throwing them out there and then pulling them back with abilities, and then keep doing that to where they're constantly moving. And your survivability comes from them never being close enough to hit you, and when they are close enough, they're either stunned or taking damage that's coming out to push them back again. So the first thing I want to go with is Cleave, because it's a nice front cone AoE, which would be pretty good. And mostly because of the rune that it draws enemies within 20 yards right in front of you, which would be pretty nice. That's just another thing to pull them in if your next ability, I believe that we're going to talk about, is on cooldown, which is Ancient Spear. This one, it's more like a lot of people actually would probably like to use this PvP ability because you can throw it out there and it drags enemies towards you, which would be pretty good to help stop kiting and stuff when we talk about PvP and everything. But there's also a cool rune where you can throw 5 spears at the same time and it'll draw any enemy that it hits within those spears. So that's also one of your other pull-in abilities that you'll use to help generate Fury, which is pretty interesting. And then we went with Hammer the Ancients because it's a nice, since everything's pulled in and tight in front of you, you can slam that down and hit them all for a good Fury dump. Which we also did the Rolling Thunder one, which modifies the damage into a shockwave in front of you in front of you, okay. It increases the weapon damage, and within 22 yards in front of you, you'll have a big shockwave of damage, which is pretty good. We also want to go with Ground Stomp, mostly because we wanted a little bit of control and making sure that they couldn't just totally destroy you when you pulled in all these enemies right in front of you. So like you'd Cleave or you'd Ancient Spear and then Ground Stomp to stun them almost right away. And we went with Wrenching Smash, which increases the area of effect, so that way you just have more that you're hitting for your Ground Stomp, so that'll be pretty cool. We went with Earthquake. Now, unfortunately, we don't know exactly how Earthquake works. We believe that it is an AoE around you. So this one is more just, we wanted a big Fury spender that gave you a lot of damage. And not to mention some of the runes that they had were pretty cool. So this could help even if you're wasting some of the AoE from behind you, because you generally want enemies like right in front of you. It'll be pretty good. And then what we chose was Flying Boulder, which projects secondary tremors that just increase more damage and make it fire damage too, which is pretty cool. Now your main ability that's going to throw the enemies back away from you is going to be your Seismic Slam. Slams the ground doing 230 weapon damage and then knocking them back in a 45-yard arc. It's going to be another Fury spender that's going to dump your Fury and stuff. And we wanted to increase the damage and the knockback. Now hopefully, the only problem that I might have with this rune that I chose is that the knockback may be too much, and then you spend more time trying to run up and get your enemies again. So we're going to have to do a little testing when we can actually get runes out to see if that's really effective. There are some other runes that we could choose, but just from a theoretical standpoint, that seemed like the most interesting with the flow of how the build is going to work. So some of the passives, we decided since you're always going to have enemies like right in front of you and stuff, you should generally always have at least, around 8 or 5 enemies within 8 yards. So we thought that that was almost a permanent increase in damage in the later levels of the game. And then we went with Bloodthirst just because the build doesn't have a whole ton of survivability since it's mostly based off of getting the right flow of sending them back, the enemies back and forth. So this is just a nice little gap stop in case, the build actually doesn't work out that well. When you pull them out towards you, they just, one-shot you. Hopefully this will help make sure that doesn't happen. And then also this is, we went with this one because we can increase a couple different things like crit chance or attack speed, depending on what you're using, or damage. Mostly because a lot of the other abilities that you could choose with passives weren't as good, and they didn't affect the skills, the active skills that you choose. So this was, no matter what, it's going to be a flat increase or something. So that's the Tides of Pain build. Now we will go into another one. Go ahead.
Alright, so one of the things we asked ourselves is, well, barbs are mostly close combat, in your face, but is it possible to make a ranged barb? And we developed a build we think might actually work. Again, we chose War Cry with the Golden Charge to get that initial burst of Fury, as well as unleashing Rallying Cry to increase armor. We chose Ancient Spear with the 5 spears to kind of launch spears at multiple enemies at a time. However, this is on a 10-second cooldown, so we would start with this, go into the Ancient Spear with the Indigo Runestone as a kind of a initial Fury generation, and then go into our main attack, which would be the Weapon Throw. This hurls a weapon for 180% weapon damage and slows movement of the enemy by 70% for 4 seconds. So this would be a way to keep enemies away from you after you've knocked them back, which we will use with Seismic Slam, but we'll get to that in just a moment. For the Runestone, we chose the Crimson Runestone, which does increase damage to 236% weapon damage. This just hits harder, so things will go down faster. We chose Battle Rage to increase our critical hit chance with the Into the Fray, the Golden Runestone, to try and increase additional Fury. So if we get off a few critical hits with this, we're also generating Fury, so we can keep doing the Weapon Throw longer. As our big Fury spender, we decided to do Call of the Ancients. This again keeps the barb away from the middle of the fray because now there are 4 more summons. He's going to be using 3 more, to attack. We chose the Indigo Rune, which makes the Ancients inflict more damage with each attack and have more armor. So they're up a little bit more if they're taking heavy damage, and they also do a little bit more damage. And then if things get close, we chose to do Seismic Slam to knock things back, so we can go back into Weapon Throw. We chose Crimson Runestone for this to do the increased damage and increased knockback. Unlike the Tides of Pain, we want to knock them back far away so we can keep the Weapon Throw up and we don't have to knock them back as much, so we can keep the Fury spending more towards the Weapon Throw and less towards Seismic Slam. For the passive skills, we chose No Escape, which does increased damage to the Ancient Spear and the thrown weapon. In addition, when you crit with Ancient Spear, it automatically resets the cooldown, so we could actually get a couple of those out if we happen to crit. And also, the key part to this is that Weapon Throw returns 20 Fury on a critical hit. So not only are you generating 4 Fury with the Golden Runestone, you'll be generating 24 and increasing your percent chance to critical hit with the Battle Rage. So this is definitely very synergetic with Weapon Throw and this passive skill. Ideally, if you stack enough crit, you'll be able to just keep throwing your weapon the entire time and not losing out on Fury, but you may even generate it, which will be great because then you can Seismic Slam whenever you want when things get too close and keep your Battle Rage up at all times. Again, we chose Unforgiving because Fury doesn't degenerate and generates, especially if you're throwing crits all over the place. You'll actually be able to gain Fury a little bit more every 2 seconds. And then the Weapon Master, just to increase damage or crit percent chance. So I feel like Thrown Axes would be a really good one for this, or even Pole Arms or Spears for the attack speed or the increased critical hit.
The only issue that we may have with this build is it may have to be modified if the Fury generation is too lackluster, because if you don't crit, then all you have is Warcry and Ancient Spear, which is on the cooldown, and that means you don't have a spammable Fury generator. So that may have to be modified. I think in the early game it may not work out as well. It seems like a later game build, because your gear is going to be a lot more important. Make sure you get to that crit level where you don't have to worry about it.
Anything that stacks crit is going to be very important for this build, and it might take a long time.
Yeah, it's a lot like the Frenzy build, where you're gonna crit and attack speed is going to be like the #1 thing for this build.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, so of course with every build there has to be a PvP build. There's a lot of different builds, honestly, when I was going through this and looking at all the different builds that you could do. It's based on the situation, and since we don't have all the information on how PvP is exactly going to work, we weren't sure. So we went around with just an average build to kind of control most people. If you're fighting like all ranged, obviously some of these abilities will change, because like Ancient Spear is a really good PvP ability. That'll definitely help that kiting issue. But we did at least go with Leap Attack, so that way we got a gap closure no matter what. So yeah, I went with Leap Attack, and then I wanted to make sure that I could, after I leap, I had a really good chance of stunning them right there, so I could hold them down and do some DPS right away. And then Ground Stomp also has a chance to stun them, and it inflicts damage, which is pretty good in an AoE. And then after that, I wanted to make sure, again, that we don't have that problem with, ranged kiting you or something, so I went with the Alabaster Runestone to reduce their movement speed after they recover from the stun, which is pretty good. I went with Bash just as a general Fury generator, because most of the time in PvP, you'll be focusing on most likely one target and chasing it down the entire time. You may be switching off, but no matter what, you're generally facing only one target. So you didn't need like Cleave or anything like that. And then I gave this, again, increase the chance of stun. You want to make sure to lock down the enemy as much as possible and keep them right next to you. And then as kind of like a big damage boost and a Fury dump, I went with Hammer of the Ancients, which I think is pretty good because it does a pretty decent amount of damage, and it has an increased chance to crit, which is pretty nice. So it's a pretty good damage. Then I just went with a small area of effect because you're not fighting a whole bunch of guys. Maybe a little harder to land this because of the small area. We're not sure exactly how defined that small area is, but it does increase weapon damage. So hopefully you can bash their face in with this one when they're all stunned up, which is pretty good. Now, of course, in the PvP build, I was going a lot with stuns, so I wasn't sure if I wanted to get some survivability. So this is kind of where I'm not sure. I'd have to test it out to see if it's really good. But we went with Ignore Pain in case you're in that moment where you're like, uh-oh, I'm about to die, and I need to get a health globe before, I hit the ground. So this is a situational one that I use, and then I just, I use the Alabaster in which you gain damage dealt as life, because that's generally when you're hitting it, is when you need life the most. And the Wrath of Berserker, this one's kind of iffy. I guess it's more based off of just how the build works, since you're stunning and stuff. Critical hit, dodge, chance, and movement speed are all pretty good, and it will help maintain survivability while giving you some movement and some damage and stuff. You could go with all the other ones. We're not sure how Call the Ancients, how strong those summons are going to be, so that may actually be a lot better, because in a sense turns you into 4 barbarians instead of just 1. So I just went with that one more or less because we don't know everything that it does. And then I went with a more defensive build room for dodge chance. I'm not exactly sure how the dodge chance works completely in this game or how effective it's going to be, so that may change, but for the most part we felt that was a pretty good one because that gives you a really high dodge. Then some of the patches I went with were Juggernaut, which I think this is going to be a staple of every PvP build because it reduces impairing effects, and whenever you're stunned, feared, or charmed, you recover 15% of your maximum life. So it's almost like it's a negative to slow you down, which is pretty good. And then this one's mostly just when you're below health, you hit Ignore Pain, and then this thing will go off. Which, when you're below 20% health, all your skills cost no fury, which is going to be really nice. And damage taken is reduced by 50%. So this will be really good. Like if it's a close battle, and you're like, I just got to live out, like 1 or 2 hits more, and then I'll be able to kill him. You can hit Ignore Pain, and then, once this thing goes off, you don't have to worry about fury anymore. So you just keep slamming Hammer the Ancients as much as you possibly can. So that's a pretty good one. And then we went with this one just because it increases armor. I'm not sure how much the physical damage is going to be in the later end of the game, so this could be really important, or maybe we'll change it out for something else. But also, I think one of the cool things is the Thorns damage is increased by 100%. It'd be pretty cool to see a build where you go with a lot of health and a lot of Thorn damage, to where that way, if you're close to them, you're stunning them and smashing them in the face with Hammer the Ancients. But if you're not, and you're chasing them, just attacking you means they're still going to be taking damage, which will be pretty nice. You want to maximize the amount of damage you can get for free, so this was probably one of the cooler abilities for that.
Definitely. Now for our last load. Sorry, wrong misclick. We decided to go with a little fun. A lot of these runes have practical purposes and a lot of statistical things, but also a lot of them are for fun. And we decided to make something that goes boom. So we chose the Boom Goes the Dynamite, which is all about the big things. The Call of the Ancients, Wrath of the Berserker, and Earthquake. First, we started off with Warcry with the Golden Rune Stone. You get that initial Fury generation. We went in with Leap Attack with the Indigo, which sends enemies hurtling 6 yards into other nearby enemies who suffer 31% weapon damage and are pushed back in a chain of up to 2 times, just because this is Boom Goes the Dynamite, and if we're going to be leaping in, we want to make a big boom. We chose Frenzy to generate a lot of Fury as fast as we can, and we put the Golden Rune Stone with it, which adds a 22% chance to call down a bolt of lightning from above, stunning your targets for 3 seconds. So even the Frenzy is going to go boom. We put out the Call of the Ancients with the Obsidian Rune Stone, which gives one of your Ancients, Matawak, a Seismic Slam, so even your summons are doing big booms. We chose Wrath of the Berserker, just because you become a giant war beast, with the Indigo Rune Stone, which knocks back all enemies upon activation of Wrath of the Berserker. So when you transform into this, you make all your enemies fly away.
That's a big explosion.
A big explosion. Another Boom Goes the Dynamite. And last but not least, Earthquake, which shakes the ground violently, dealing weapon damage and fire to all enemies. And we chose the Crimson Rune Stone to create secondary aftershocks that do fire damage. We're hoping there's a really cool fire effect from this, so that's really going to be a nice big boom to add into all of this. So this is Boom Goes the Dynamite. We're not even sure if this is practical or doable, but we thought it'd be a lot of fun to do. Definitely doable and normal. Not sure about later games, but if you can pull this off, it'll be great.
Yeah, because the biggest issue with this build is the Fury generation. All those abilities cost 50 Fury. So, like, you have to, like, Warcry, Leap Attack, and Frenzy away, Call the Ancients, and then continue to Frenzy until you get up 100, and then as soon as you get 100, be like, Earthquake, Wrath of the Berserker, and just watch everything explode.
Oh yeah, we want things to go boom with this build. For our passive skills, we chose Boon of Golkathos, which decreases all 3, Call of the Ancients, Wrath of the Berserker, and Earthquake by 30 seconds. So instead of 120 seconds, it'll be going at 90 seconds, which is a minute and a half. So we want to get these going up as fast as we possibly can. We chose Animosity to increase Fury generation, so we don't have to be leap attacking or frenzying as much, and also increases the maximum Fury generation, which actually could be really big for this kind of build. Because of that 50 Fury cost, we might actually be able to squeeze one of these out a little faster than if we didn't have that increased Fury. And then Bloodthirst. I guess we decided we wanted some survivability to this, even though this is just a giant explosion. So we did gain 3% of all damage done in his life, and you're probably going to be regenning almost all your life, especially if all of these three are going off. So, I mean, the enemy may get you down, but if you can knock all three of these off, you may be at full health by the end of it. Is it doable? We don't really know, but it's definitely something we'd like to try, and it just really shows that the runestones can be a lot of fun too.
It'll be interesting too, because there is gear that increases Fury generation. So I would have to say, like, going with that, and then going with like just stuff that increases flat damage.
Yeah.
Just so that way, when the boom goes off, you just level everything.
Yeah. This could be either brilliantly successful or a complete and utter failure. We're not sure.
Well,
but
I think it's a good build for just like the trash.
yeah.
But I don't know if this would be that effective for a boss.
No, I don't think so either. But I mean, it might be, especially in group play.
Yeah, you still have Frenzy and Wrath of Berserker, so even if you can't constantly hit all these abilities, you can still provide some kind of damage.
Yeah, and I mean, especially a lot of bosses probably have some sort of ad generation. I know Leoric does. Maybe one of the later bosses, maybe just a giant big bad that you have to put down. But this might be really good for taking care of ads that are summoned.
Yeah.
In any sort of boss fight. If they have a like Uber version of the bosses where there's tons of guys all around and you still have to bring down the bosses, this might actually be very good to try and take care of some of those ads while other people are taking care of the Uber boss. But we're not even sure there's going to be an Uber boss in this. You never know.
So the only build that we didn't go over was like a pure tank build, and the reason why we did that was because since we don't have the full game, we don't know how important that role is. And regular Diablo 2, and with what they've said with this game, they want to make sure that it's very soloable. You know, like, they do enjoy group play, and they will definitely give you more benefits for group play, but they're like, well, we don't want to make it to where if you don't have anyone to play with it, you can't do anything. So we generally went with builds that kind of balanced some survivability with a good amount of damage. But there's definitely enough passive skills and abilities that can just make you a pure tank. So they may be viable, but since we don't know how it's going to play out in the later levels, we're not sure how important that's going to be. And it's a pretty simple build. You just choose everything that, you know, says increases defense or health or anything like that. So, and gear would just be, you know, like health, defense. Probably.
And I mean, to be honest, if they do require a heavy-duty tank, unless it's like for one boss or like an Uber fight or something, it'd be a little too much like WoW. I feel like there's some aspects of WoW in this, in that like you have the quick bar for all your attacks and all of that, which is fine. I think it works really well because I mean it came out before WoW did. However, if we're assigning roles to a barbarian tank and a monk healer, it's getting a little too MMO-y and lacks that kind of you can just fight and beat the snot out of things feel that Diablo should have. Right. So I would like to say that they're probably not going to need it all that often, and if they do, it probably will only be for like a boss fight or two. And the great thing about this new system is that you can interchange all of these skills whenever you need. So if you need to build a tank build, you can just build it from the same character, which is very useful. The only issue is you may not have the runestones or all the gear set up to really maximize it, but it is possible.
Yep. Okay, so that is the Barbarian. We're going to be doing builds for all the different classes. So we will definitely have more things of this. But it'd also be pretty cool to see if anyone that happens to be watching, if they could think of any interesting builds and link them to us. just with a little, a few details about the purpose of the build, how you think it'll work on a theoretical level. Unfortunately, since we don't have the full game, all this stuff could be completely different by the time the game comes out, especially with how things keep changing during every patch. So, just make sure to send us some stuff, and we can have some fun kind of messing around with this.
Yeah. If you're watching us on Twitch TV, you can also watch us and leave us comments and subscribe to us at youtube.com/D3PowerUnderwhelming. If you're watching us at YouTube, you can also watch us. We're trying to do a daily show right now. Whether or not we're successful is kind of up to work schedules and whatnot. But you can watch us at Twitch TV /PowerUnderwhelming. And you can reach me, Magnus, at Magnus751 on Twitter.
And me at Reserve.
We also have a Facebook page. Just look up Power Underwhelming and you can check us out then. Thanks for watching.
Have a good one.